Hello viewers. Today we are going to discuss most amazing writer of Puritan age. He is most important writer of English Civil War period. The greatest Puritan writer Milton was born in 1608 to John Milton Sr. and Sarah in Brest Street near London. That was a time when Shakespeare was writing and he was only going to retire in 1610. And one of the earliest poem of John Milton was about Shakespeare only. Milton lived up to 1674. He had schooling in St. Paul's School and Christ College, Cambridge. His education was in classics. He became a polyglot. That means he could speak many languages and with devotion to study, he became great scholar. He wrote both in Latin and English. And now, as I told you, he went to Christ College, Cambridge to study. Milton was delicate young man with long hair and he was very quiet and easy in his ways. And so people used to call him Our Lady of Christ. That means Lady of Christ College, Cambridge. When Milton finished his MA, that was in 1632, at that time he had already started writing. Earlier, he wanted to become an Anglican priest, but now he dropped this idea and instead he spent the following 6 years studying diligently on his own to become a great poet. He always wanted to become a great poet. Early in his career, he translated some Latin poems, some religious poems, and afterwards he went to live with his parents in Hammersmith and then went to live in Horton with them. These are the period in which he wrote his earliest works, that is in Horton period. Ode on the Death of a Fair Infant Dying of Cough is the poem of this period. This has heartbreaking theme. Next, he contributed a poem to the second folio on Shakespeare, and that is today called On Shakespeare. So that was in 1632 folio on Shakespeare. Another early poems in this is on the morning of Christ's nativity. It is also known as Nativity Ode. Critics regard this as a first Miltonic work, so it has all the characteristics which a Milton work had. At this time, he was writing two companion poems, L'Allegro and Il Penseroso. These are very famous poems. L'Allegro is about one cheerful day in countryside, and Il Penseroso is a one melancholy day in the countryside. So these are companion poems. These poems are not Puritan poems. These are descriptive poems. Earlier in Milton, there was a Renaissance quality were high, but later on, over the age, Puritan's qualities dominated his personality. When Milton was living in Horton, he wrote some very important poems. Among them were Two Masks, Arcades and Commerce, and also his popular pastoral elegy, Lycidas. Arcades and Commerce are the masque, that means theatrical entertainment, performed in the court by amateur courtiers. Arcades was written to celebrate the character of Alice Spencer, that is a Countess of Derby, and Commerce was written to be performed at the Ludlow Castle Theatre. So these were also very famous masks. Now next comes Lycidas, that is a pastoral elegy. It was written to commemorate the death of his friend Edward King. Edward King was his fast friend. Edward King was a great man. He was a promising youth. He had promising future. He could be a great poet and greatest clergyman, but sadly he died young, and he drowned in Aris Sea. Everybody mourned his death. Milton wrote Lycidas as a part of a group of commemorate poems that were written by all the friends of Cambridge together. After the Horton period, Milton went on a 15 months foreign tour to France and Italy that began in 1638. Traveling abroad, he met many greatest Renaissance masters, including scientist Galileo. Later on, he mentioned him, that is Galileo, in his poem, in his prose work Aeropagitica, that was against the censorship of books. When he returned to London, things was drastically changed in England. A civil war was being fought in England. It was a very turbulent time for England. Milton was Puritan, so he supported Puritans and Republicans and Cromwell against the king and royalist. Milton was a great scholar, writer, and orator, so he became Shakespeare a spokesperson for them. The civil war was between Puritans and Roundheads and royalists or cavaliers. So Milton was wrote many prose works at this time. His prose works were dominant in this period. His prose works were powerful and political, but he always wanted to write poetry. His first love was poetry. He always says that poetry. He has secured his left hand for poetry, so that he will write it later on when he will have some more time for that. Milton wrote for a series of four diverse tracts on the doctrines of discipline of divers. Milton was staunch Puritan, and Puritans are strict religious and they did not like any kind of pleasure. So uh, Milton was a Puritan by heart, and this quality also dominated in his writings. He married three times. When he married for the first time Mary Powell ran away. he could not, she could not tolerate a strict Milton. Although Milton was a polyglot and a great scholar, but maybe he was not fit for the household course, and he was not a good husband. So she left him. But Milton was very upset, and he wanted to marry again. So he wanted a divorce from Mary Powell. So Milton presented this matter in Parliament and pleaded. So they passed a law that a woman cannot leave her husband. Then Mary Powell had to come back, and she died during the childbirth. Then he married Elizabeth. She also died during childbirth. So he went for the third marriage. At this time, age gap between the couple was 31 years. So this time Milton died. So it was a kind of a patriarchy, a mindset. When Milton was advocating divorce, he was being against the conventions of Protestants. It was against the conventions of Protestantism. There was in 1643 a licensing order was passed, and Milton wrote against this censorship order of licensing. And that famous pamphlet is Aeropagitica. This is a prose work. It published in on 1644, and it was on the freedom of the press. It was the form of a speech addressing uh, the Parliament of England, and it was very popular at that time, and it showed prowess of Milton. Milton's greatest poems were published after Restoration period: Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. Paradise Lost was published in 10 books in 1667. It is the only literary epic in English. It is in blank verse. It has a classical echoes, and it comes with explanatory notes on Milton. The aim of Paradise Lost is to justify the ways of God to the mankind, and also its subject of Paradise Lost is the fall of man. Earlier, the book was first published in 1667. It was in 10 books, but later on it was revised and it came in 10 parts. And it was arranged in 12 parts in manner of Virgil's Aeneid, and it contained more than um, 10,000 lines of verses. And it was very popular at that time, and now also. Paradise Lost was the first epic poem that was written in blank verse. This epic poem is about the biblical story of a fall of man, the temptation of Adam and Eve by the fallen angel Saturn, that is, we can call in Hindi Shaitan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. John Milton had gone completely blind in 1652, while he started writing Paradise Lost in 1658. Milton had read all the epics in Latin, Greek, and he imbibed, observed the tradition of epic writing. Therefore, when he writes Paradise Lost, he is fully aware of what he is doing, what he is writing. He is conscious of his responsibility as an epic writer, and this he shows in Paradise Lost totally. So, this was a short biography of John Milton. Hope you liked the video, and if you so, please press the like button and subscribe my channel. Thank you for listening to me.